Hello, and welcome to Supporting Families, Establishing Routines and Engaging Home Environments. Before we get started, I have just one housekeeping announcement, and that is that this session is being recorded and all participants will receive an email tomorrow afternoon with a certificate of attendance and a link to the recording. With that, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Holly Delgado, and I am an early childhood specialist with HighScope Educational Research Foundation. I am honored to be a part of this webinar series alongside many of my colleagues, determining how we all at HighScope can best meet all of your needs during this unprecedented time. I am joined today by three of my colleagues. First is Shannon Lockhart. Shannon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. My name is Shannon Lockhart, and I'm an early childhood applied practice manager. I've been with the foundation for over 30 years. I work both with the HighScope infant, toddler, and preschool curriculums, as well as the trainings, and I oversee the Training of Trainers program. We're looking forward to sharing all of our ideas with you and hearing from your any ideas that you are sharing as well.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Next up, we have Jenny Fent.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jenny Fent. I am a preschool teacher at the HighScope Demonstration Preschool. I've worked in early childhood classrooms for the last 10 years as volunteer, assistant teacher, lead teacher, co-teacher. So I'm really excited today to share some of the strategies and things that we've been doing over the last, well, since this started. And hopefully it can be of help to you guys. And just like Shannon, hopefully we can learn from you as well.
Great, thanks so much, Jenny. And then finally, the other colleague who's on with me this afternoon is Sharon Wortley.
Good afternoon, my name's Sharon Wortley. I'm one of the teachers in the demonstration preschool. I have worked in early childhood programs for the last 18 years, and I'm so excited to be here with you to share my wealth of knowledge with you.
Great, thank you so much, Sharon. And then of course, behind the scenes, we do have countless other colleagues on our early childhood team, as well as from our marketing team and across the HighScope Research Foundation that have been part of this series. We know that COVID-19 has left many of us wondering how we will be able to keep our children and our families safe. And for many programs across our nation and around the world, this means that we're beginning this school year in a remote or hybrid option. Throughout this webinar, we are excited to share some guidelines with you for taking HighScope virtual, but it will be important to remain true to our HighScope philosophies and best practices during that process. First, even in a virtual world, we need to ensure that what we are offering to our families is authentic and meaningful. We need to consider their needs as a family, the developmental levels of the children, and we need to individualize learning just as we would in our classroom setting. Developmentally appropriate practices are just as important now as they have always been. The work that we are asking parents to complete with children at home still needs to be rooted in active learning. We cannot make a shift to worksheets or workbooks or paper and pencil tasks simply because they are easy to send home. COVID-19 does not change what we know children need in order to grow and develop. It should not change our methodologies or our philosophies, just our delivery model. We want to make sure that we are in regular and frequent contact with our families. Each program needs to determine what this means in regards to frequency and duration based on the needs of the children and your families enrolled in your programs. So whether you choose daily communication or weekly communication, remember our goal is to support families and to not overwhelm them. We need to ensure families are aware and they understand what our expectations are of them. And likewise, we need to do our best to make sure we're scheduling meetings with families at times in which there is someone available to assist. If you have direct interactions with the child, or at times that best fit into their schedules if you happen to be coaching and supporting parents at that moment. Modes of communication can also vary. We've moved into a world where video conferencing has become second nature. And while it has many benefits, pre-recorded videos, phone calls, emails, even snail mail correspondence are still other modalities of communication that are all acceptable during this time. Above all else, we need to greatly consider equity and access. This might mean technology devices or internet connection. I know several school districts who were able to provide tablets or computers for families, but that might not be the case in your own situation. So we need to ensure your mode of communication best meets the needs of families. And if not, work with them, work with your program administration, and work with other community resources to determine another solution. It might mean materials. How are we thinking about materials that are available in families' homes? Or how are we providing the materials that may not be in those homes? Equity and access could also mean time. Do you have working parents? Do you have families with multiple siblings that they're trying to support in virtual learning environments at other grade levels? What other jobs might your family members have that could get in the way of being able to log in to this early childhood program? Equity and access could also mean other physical or social and emotional needs. Is the family able to get their essential needs met? Do they have family members or close friends who are sick? Really thinking about how COVID-19 has impacted each of your families personally will be extremely important during this time. Finally, we also need to take the American Academy of Pediatrics screen time guidelines and think about how those affect our program. Children aged 2 to 5 should not have more than 1 hour of screen time per day. This includes any screen time that they might receive, including those outside of our own interactions with them. Additionally, we should be discouraging screen time for children under the age of 18 months. We need to take this into account as we are developing our plans and remain true to what we know in our hearts that children need in order to grow and develop. Thus, our remote interactions do not always need to be with children. In fact, most of them should be with family members. In essence, as early childhood educators, especially our infant and toddler teachers, we might need to shift from teaching children to coaching parents. I've talked about remaining true to HighScope philosophies, and so now I'm actually going to turn it over to Sharon, who is going to discuss 2 of our key components of our curriculum that we want to make sure still stand in a remote world. Sharon?
Thank you. Even though many programs are doing remote learning, active learning is still the heart of the HighScope curriculum. The 5 ingredients of active learning are based on intrinsic motivation that makes active learning work. We need to ensure that our parents understand each of the 5 ingredients. Providing them an example of what active learning might look like might help. For example, one activity that can be done remotely has all the ingredients of active learning. Is going outside with a child and drawing a picture of what they see. The materials would be markers, crayons, or paper. Manipulation and choice. The child is free to use the materials in whatever way they choose, what color they would like to use, and what they would like to draw, and how they would like to draw what they see. Child language and thought. The child describes what they are doing or going to draw, or what they have drawn in their own words. Adult scaffolding. Talking with the child to support them at their current level and gently extended learning. Label what the child has done. Oh, I see you used red, yellow, and green markers to draw your picture. Ask the child to tell you about their drawings. Offer gentle extensions. What else do you see? Or let's think about how we might draw that. Or what shape do you see? What does it look like? Remind parents for true active learning, adults should be involved with the child. It's more than just giving the child the materials and having the child work independently. Active learning occurs when all the ingredients are present, when children are given choice of what material they want to use, how they want to use the materials, and the adult acknowledge the child's choice, and the child will stay engaged longer. We all know that this is a very difficult time for families. Some of the things we can do to support families that we serve is encourage the families to join in their child's play. Get down at their child's level. If the child's laying on the floor, rolling a car, lay down on the floor and use the car the same way the child's using the car. When encourage children to solve problems at home, I know it's so much easier for adults to just jump in and solve the problems for the children. Instead, allow children to solve their problems on their own. Make sure to give them time they need to solve the problem. If adults have to intervene, encourage them to be patient and non-judgmental. When conversing with children, encourage families to listen patiently to what the child is saying. Don't ask too many questions. Let the child be in control of the conversations. And last but not least, encourage families to ask open-ended questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Sharon. Like you mentioned, it is going to be so important for our families to understand the work that we do as early childhood educators. So throughout this year, as we are working remotely, we need to make sure that we are asking ourselves, how are we supporting and coaching our parents? It will become extremely important for us to really break down child development into bite-sized chunks that our family members can really understand. We will need to explain all of the whys of our work. Why is this part of the daily routine important? Why are we doing this particular activity? Why do we approach parts of our curriculum in a specific way? To start us off on some of these whys, I'm actually going to turn it over to Jenny, who's going to talk about the importance of creating daily schedules and how we can support families in understanding this specific piece of early childhood. Jenny?
Yeah, thanks, Holly. So when we ask the question, why are consistent routines important to young children? We as teachers are familiar with the benefits and how consistency helps children feel a sense of security and control. They know what's going to happen. They know what's going to come next. It helps to make transitions easier. It helps to make the day flow better. So as you said, our job now is going to be to help support and really coach families about why it's important for young children to have consistency, and to partner with them as their child's first and most important teacher in how to implement this kind of consistency at home. So whether you're full-time in person or you're hybrid, so children are at home a few days a week and they're in your program setting a few days a week, or if you're fully virtual, using this consistent language and images about the routine at home and at school can really help strengthen that home-school connection and give children a sense of security and control in both settings, home and school. And so by coaching families on, the whys and the hows, we're giving them strategies that they can use immediately to support their children at home. So now we're going to take a look at a video that I made in the spring. We did this, it's a picture schedule tutorial video. And we did this when we were closed in person, and we were using the family engagement messaging features on Core Advantage to send families digital content. And so it was really, my goal with this video was really, to keep it simple and show families, again, the whys and the hows of creating and using a routine at home to help support their children. So I really wanted to stress in the video that, we're not expecting parents to create a full day of preschool at home, but rather that, we want to support them of what their schedule looks like at that time, and teach them the same strategies that we use to support the children to support their own children at home. Let's take a look. Hi guys, Jenny here again with another video tutorial. Today I want to talk to you about routines and schedules. And as hard as this can be for adults to deal with changes in our routines, it's equally hard, if not more difficult, for young children. As young children really thrive on predictable and consistent routines that help them feel safe and secure, in knowing what comes next. And so I'm going to help you today in how you can support your child in following a predictable, consistent routine. But just thinking about like the parts of your day and the order in which you do them and creating something called a picture schedule. So I've made a little sample here, and your day may look different, but this is just an example. And so what I've done is on pieces of paper, I drew a picture and wrote the word for each part of the day. So if the first part of your day is breakfast, this would be first on your schedule. So you might have like a picture of a bowl, a glass and a spoon with the word breakfast. And so say maybe after breakfast, it's outside time. So, I just drew a simple picture of a person with a sun and the words outside time. Then maybe after outside time, it's activity time. So that could be the part of the day where you choose an activity that we've sent you either through the weekly packets or the videos, or to look at a read aloud and to spend that little bit of time with your preschooler doing that. And then after that, maybe it's playtime, the time of day where your child can, like a free play where they can choose what toy they want to play with, similar to our work time in the classroom. And of course, what always follows playtime? Cleanup time. Not always the favorite of every child, but again, part of the routine and something that needs to happen. So as important as that consistent routine is, it's also to remember it's okay if changes need to happen. Just give children warning about it and let them know that the changes are coming. So say that after breakfast you usually go outside, but today it's raining, so you might have to move outside time to later and maybe do activities after breakfast instead. So when you're displaying the routine in your home, you can find a place where you have enough room for it. And it doesn't have to be really big. So you can either display it horizontally from like left to right, or you could display it vertically, from top to bottom, just whatever way that makes sense to you and your family. One idea I saw was a family put it on their fridge with magnets so that they could easily change the times around. Speaking again of times like cleanup time, another tip for you is, children have a hard time wanting to stop doing something that's fun to do something that they might not want to do. But if cleanup time is the part of your day that you have to do, it's always a good idea to give a time warning. So maybe if there's 5 more minutes left of playtime, you could say, remind your child, 5 more minutes, and then it's going to be time to stop playing and start cleaning. So one more tip about routines and schedules for today is taking a particular part of your day and breaking it down even further. So the example I'm going to use for this is like your bedtime routine. So picture schedules, again, can be a really great way to reinforce the sequence of events of first we do this, then we do that, then we do this. And you can always keep referring back to these. So maybe bath time is the first part of your routine. Then maybe you brush your teeth. And then after you brush your teeth, you get a story. And then it's time to sleep. It's bedtime. So maybe if your child is resistant to brushing their teeth, but they like story time, you can refer back to them and remind them that, hey, I know you don't like brushing your teeth, but remember, I can't find it. When we're done brushing our teeth, then it's going to be book time again. So I hope this has been helpful for you guys. I know it's hard, and again, you don't have to try to recreate exactly preschool in your home. What you're doing is wonderful, and we appreciate so much all the time and effort that you've put into working with your preschooler and just being the best, doing what you can. You are enough. If you try out these daily routines, let us know how it went. You can always send us a picture or email us or drop us a message using Core at Home. Until next time, bye. Right. So again, that video was created back in the spring, to help coach parents, families specifically, on how they can support their own children at home with a consistent daily routine. And so you noticed I made sure to talk to families in the video about, why children need a consistent routine, how to support that by being flexible with changes, letting children know when changes were going to happen, giving time warnings about transitions, and talking about, breaking down parts of the day, like bedtime, into mini schedules. And again, so as teachers, we know that these are the best practices to help support children in the classroom. And so by making videos like these, it's kind of like a small chunk of a family workshop or a parent meeting where you're talking about and you're modeling, these easy, actionable tips that families can use at home. So back when I made this video, you saw I just used like simple pictures that I drew myself. But another idea that you could do would be to use the daily routine images at home that teachers are using in the HighScope classroom. So these images that you see here on the screen are the same that we use, and many of you may already be using these in the classroom. They're very simple to draw and recreate, and they're easy for children to recognize and understand. And so today, as an attendee of today's webinar, you'll be receiving an email in 24 hours that will include a link to download these daily routine images that you see here at no charge. Also at the link, there'll be instructions on how to download them and how to print them. So you can use these in your classrooms, you can save them and share them with your families at home to really build that consistent language and images that you're talking about, build that homeschool connection. And hey, these would be perfect images for you to use if you were going to record your own video tutorial for the families that you're serving and supporting this school year in your classroom.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. Those are fantastic ideas. And we definitely hope that you all access that daily routine resource that Jenny was just mentioning. So those will be available again in an email that you will receive in 24 hours. So after a follow-up to our webinar. Now we're going to shift gears just a little bit, and we're going to think specifically about each of the components of our HighScope daily routine. So here, what you are seeing is all of the elements of a typical HighScope day. So in our classrooms, on a typical day, we would want to make sure that we see each of these components on a daily basis. But we know that this year is not going to be typical, right? We are in a now normal. So like Shannon mentioned yesterday during our webinar on learning environments and daily routines, if your program is face-to-face or if you're hybrid, but you've chosen to shorten your day to limit exposure or to allow for more sanitization time, you may have to adjust your schedules this year. Likewise, if you're implementing a virtual or a remote learning schedule, we will also have to adjust what elements of the HighScope daily routine happen daily. This next slide shows us the components of the HighScope daily routine that we believe can be successfully facilitated in a live virtual setting, and those that we believe fit the home environment more effectively. So as you can see, really only small group, large group, and interactive read alouds are the only components of the HighScope day that fit securely into a live virtual model. In just a minute, I will provide you some additional clarification and guidelines surrounding that. But essentially, at HighScope, we believe that these are the three elements of our daily routine that we would recommend that you may be able to implement live virtually throughout the entire school year. That said, they do not have to be provided that way. As you can see, we also believe that these could be successfully facilitated in the home environment by family members. When we're thinking about these three elements of the daily routine in the home setting, so large group, small group, and read aloud specifically, it's more about the type of activity as opposed to the number of children involved. So for example, large group time is a time when we would provide music and movement, and we would encourage a sense of community. Together at home, parents and children and other siblings, friends, anyone else who might be within that particular family member's bubble right now, they can do the same thing. Similarly, small group time is all about hands-on interaction with materials for a really specific learning purpose. So again, with guidance, families can implement this type of activity at home. On the right, you will see those parts of the daily routine that we recommend to be facilitated in the home, as it makes sense. So you'll see the first one is greeting time and message board. In order to understand why we placed this particular one in home instead of live virtual, we actually need to consider the purpose of the message board. Its purpose in the classroom is really to help children become aware of new materials, perhaps child or teacher absences for that day, and to prepare them for anything that might be different in the daily routine for that particular day. But because if we're teaching virtually, we are not in children's homes, we don't actually know as teachers what might be new or different for that day. So we at HighScope believe that this should be a component of the day that parents might undertake if you choose to, or if they choose to. That said, this does not mean that we wouldn't do one or two of our own in order to model for parents the importance and what it looks like. So if you're hybrid, you could tape or video record a message board in the classroom and share that out with families, explaining its purpose. Or if you're 100% virtual, maybe you explain its purpose, or you just choose to share the idea of message board with those parents who you believe might be appropriate for. So perhaps it's really only used with those families whose children struggle a little bit when things might be new or different. Similarly, we can model our planning and our recall strategies for families, and perhaps we actually will do that modeling live virtually. But because we're not in the family's home and we don't know all of the toys and all of the materials that are available to that particular child, the plan do review process on a more ongoing basis throughout the school year, including our cleanup time, is really another area in which we would consider modeling and supporting and coaching, encouraging parents to be able to complete this on their own in their own homes. I've talked a lot about coaching support. So let's think a little bit about what that looks and sounds like. We need a model, and we need to explain the whys of each of the parts of our daily routine. So this might mean live conversation. Perhaps initially it's a live conversation that happens between you as the teacher and the child, and then it's finished out with a short conversation with the parent. It could be a planning time where you're asking the child to go get something that they might want to play with for that day, and then they bring it back. After showing you that item virtually, right, live virtually, then you can ask some of those guiding planning time questions. What are you going to do with that? What might happen if? Are there any other materials that you think you might need to be able to finish your plan? During this type of interaction with the child, we're modeling for the parent those types of questions that we might ask. And then after the child is done planning, we may allow them to head on out and begin their play, where we keep a parent on for a few extra minutes to really discuss the whys. So planning time is important because it helps children build purpose into their play. And over time, that play becomes more complex. They begin to develop skills that really start to help them build their own organizational skills, right? To help them organize themselves, all of those executive functioning skills that we know and love in early childhood. So again, planning time is something we might do occasionally to model what it looks like, but really that is something that we would want parents to do on that ongoing basis. We could also model and coach parents using some pre-recorded videos. This gives families some flexibility to watch whenever they have time, and it might seem less invasive than those live virtual trainings for families who may be more hesitant to share their screen or invite us into their homes. These videos could be tutorials or activity plans. You saw one of Jenny earlier, and we're going to show you another example in a couple of moments. But also these could be you modeling the strategies. So as you're reading a book aloud, you might be pausing to ask questions, pause to allow children's responses, even though they're not there with you live. So really taking some opportunities to use videos and pre-recorded videos to model what it would look like if we were doing this live. We also want to make sure that we're providing the resources that our families might need. This should be really individualized. If you know that you have a family who has a really specific need for a specific support, or a community or a curricular resource that maybe we want to offer to all families. So making sure that we are providing those along the way. And then finally, we always want to make sure that we are following up and we're checking back in with our families regularly. We also need to consider access to materials that we might be using for our lessons. This becomes particularly important when we're starting to think about things like small group time. How are families accessing those materials? Are we providing them as the program? Maybe we have a pickup and a drop-off plan, perhaps a drive-through that happens at the school each week. Or are our teachers visiting our homes and they're doing a contactless porch pickup and porch drop-off? Materials can then get sanitized once they're returned and before they go out again to another family. Or maybe we are only using materials that are easily accessible in the family's home. So for example, perhaps we're only using things like water and spoons and cups, or we're offering multiple different options. So if we were facilitating an activity that perhaps was something like a basket toss, and we wanted to count how many baskets we made versus how many we did not make, we can actually give lots of options for that. So some families might choose to toss sock balls into a laundry basket. Others might choose to toss crumpled paper into a grocery bag or an actual ball into a bucket of some kind. Any of those could work, but we want to make sure that we are providing lots of different options so families can feel as if they can successfully complete the activity using what they already have in their homes. We also could provide a materials list for families so that they can prepare a small group before we hop on a live virtual call. So thinking about all of those materials they might need ahead of time, or we can have some one-on-one interactions that actually involve materials that are really specific to a particular child's interests. When we are considering having those live virtual meetings, there are actually a few other considerations that we really want to take into account. So first, what software are you using? Whether you use Zoom or you use Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, whatever it happens to be, we need to know if we, as the classroom teachers, know how to use all of the features successfully in order to host the meeting. But then on the opposite side, we need to know whether our family members know how to access and use the software from their end. Also, we want to think about family engagement. What are we expecting from our families? We want to ensure that they know whatever those expectations are ahead of time. And if there's siblings in the family, we might want to know if they're going to be part of that call. And that's absolutely okay. If our family members are going to join in, siblings are going to join in small group time with us. But if so, if we know that there's siblings, we also might want to think about how we, from a virtual perspective, can actually support the interactions between those family members. How can we support the siblings and the child working together? Considering frequency and duration is also important. So earlier I mentioned a little bit about choosing whether you're going to meet daily with families or you're going to meet weekly. Those decisions are completely up to you all. But we also want to keep the screen time guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics and a desire to not overwhelm our families at the forefront of all of these decisions. Striking a balance between the mode of communication, so whether we're doing live virtual conferences or we're sending pre-recorded videos, whether we're using emails or phone calls, newsletters or storyboards, or just the provision of resources, is all essential and all acceptable. Also, know that frequency and duration, as well as your mode of communication, might vary from family to family. You may have some families who, because of circumstances within that family, we're only meeting with on a much less frequent basis. Perhaps it is only once a week, whereas we're meeting more frequently with others. It's also important to really consider how many children you want involved in each live virtual video conference. Because young children don't really understand how video conference software works, and they're actually just developmentally really egocentric in their thinking, our small groups might actually only include 2 or 3 children and families. So what that means is that throughout the day, we as teachers might be repeating that same small group 3 or 4 times in order to get everybody, in order to reach everybody. But really, we need to think about schedules and how that works for family. Large group and read alouds might be similar. So in order to encourage children's language and thought, we want to make sure that we're keeping them unmuted. So again, if we're thinking about those ingredients of active learning. However, with groups of 8 or 10, or even if we had a large group, right, 16, 18, 20, that actually may not be possible virtually. So we may need to offer multiple large group sessions with smaller groups of children. Again, in the virtual world, we really need to consider the times of day to really be more equivalent to that type of activity that we are providing and not the number of children that are engaged at the same time. And then, of course, as always, equity and access needs to remain a really important consideration. Right now, we are going to watch a pre-recorded video. This is again Jenny, and in this case, she is actually presenting a specific activity. So she's presenting a language and literacy activity to her family members.
Guys, Jenny here again with another activity video for you to do at home with your preschooler. Today's activity is called Letter Hunt. So today we're going to go on a letter hunt around our home looking for letters. Now this activity supports early literacy skills, the skill of identifying and naming letters, and also being able to identify the sounds that they make. So in younger children, this might look like being able to identify that something is a letter, but not being able to name the letter. A little bit older children may be able to identify some letters, especially the letters in their name, and know some of the sounds. And even older children may be able to identify more letters and more of the sounds, and also be able to distinguish between uppercase and lowercase letters. So let's get started. So today I'm using my Hi guys. Distinguish between uppercase and lowercase letters. So let's get started. So today I'm using my iPad, but you can use any kind of device that takes photos. So it could be a cell phone, a tablet, a digital camera, anything like that. Now I've gathered some things together from around my house, but when you're doing this activity with your child, feel free to roam all over. Look in the kitchen, look in the bathroom, especially as you see I brought a cereal box from my kitchen, which has tons of letters. So when you're doing this activity with children, you can get right up in there. Let's see, I'm going to take a letter, picture of this letter, and you can ask the children questions like, oh, what letter did you find? And wait for them to answer. You can also identify the letters that children don't know. You could point out, oh, there's a capital F, just like frosted, pointing out the letter sounds and the letter. You can also encourage children to look for matches. So we found this M. Let's see if we can find another M. Oh, if I look on my videos, there's an M in empire. Children, again, will often look for letters in their own name. So for a child whose name starts with A, this would be pretty exciting to find their big A, their capital A. You can also help children connect letter sounds by pointing out other words that start with the same sound. So in the case of mini wheats, we could say mini wheats. M like in Messiah or motorcycle or milk. Ooh, this says one bowl. B like Bowie or bag or big. So there's a few different ways that you can extend this activity. Today we found things in our home to do a letter hunt, but you can also do this outside, or if you go on a walk in your neighborhood or out on a hiking trail. There's always letters everywhere to look for and find. Also, if you don't have any kind of device where you can take photos, you can also get a notepad and a pencil or a marker or pen and encourage your children to write down the letters that they find. Another option is to look for letters in magazines and sales papers. So you could look through, you could encourage your child to circle them, cut them out, maybe make them into a book or save the letters that they find. There's lots of different ways to go on a letter hunt. We hope you guys like this activity. If you try it out, let us know. Show us what kind of letters you found around your home. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Great. All right. And then to wrap up, I just have a few more lesson planning considerations. So first, like we do in the classroom, we really want to make sure when we are lesson planning for the home that we are thinking about the learning content. So whether we're aligning our plans to our curriculum content, which is our HighScope KDIs, or to our assessment core advantage, we want to make sure that we are making that learning content apparent to our family members. Remember, play-based learning may not be what they remember from their own education. So it's still really important for us to make play-based learning visible. Again, we want to make sure that we are incorporating all of those whys into our coaching supports. And then thinking again about materials in regards to access and offering multiple options, but we also want to consider things like mess factor and what are our expectations for engagement on the part of the family members. These are opportunities where family members, if they're together on a screen in a live virtual, they can also model for one another all of those adult-child interactions that Sharon mentioned earlier and are so important in the HighScope curriculum. Even though you might be remote, individualization still needs to be built into our lesson plans. It's important for us to consider both age and developmental levels of children when we're planning. We need to make sure that we're supporting families and understanding this development. We want to use our scaffolding language. So we can say things like, I noticed that your child is singing their ABCs. As we get into naming specific letters, we actually would expect them to begin thinking about those letters and knowing those letters that are really important and meaningful to them. So they might know the first letter of their name or of their brother's name, or that M is for mom or D is for dad. Sharing that information with parents will be vital. Our HighScope scaffolding cards can be extremely helpful in this area, as well as considering those various levels of core advantage. We actually have an upcoming webinar in a few weeks that will look specifically at data collection and lesson planning alignment to core advantage. So you can tune in then as well. We also recommend that you comb through all of your HighScope resources. So at the preschool level, that might be Numbers Plus or STEM Made Simple, Art Smart, Small Group Time for Active Learners, whatever it might be. And at the infant and toddler level, Tender Care and Early Learning, or Lesson Plans for a Strong Start, Let's Play and Learn Together. All of these resources have lots and lots of activities within them. Using the guidance that we've provided today, what we would like you all to do is really think about how you might be able to adapt and send those activities home to families. So similar to the tutorials that you saw Jenny do, think about how you might be able to best present that to your families. Additionally, our website, highscope.org, has some at-home learning activities that you can also share with families. To end, I just want to remind you all that throughout this entire process, our now normal, right? I don't want to say our new normal because I'm hoping that this isn't forever, but our now normal, it's really imperative that you keep those end goals in mind. This year is not going to be easy, but what we want for our children and families has not changed because of COVID-19. We still maintain the same goals, and those goals are to partner with and to support families and to enhance children's natural curiosity and their love of learning. We are now going to move into our question and answer portion of the presentation. If you haven't already, please write any questions that you might have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. and we will answer as many as we can live.
Hi, Holly. This is a question. Actually, these first few questions are around children with special needs. And since you have the expertise in this background, both Deborah Durrott and Rachel Pettinger have asked a question about how would you see these strategies in the HighScope curriculum being virtual at home with children with special needs?
Sure, that's a great question. I think absolutely, our children with special needs, we definitely need to make sure that we are reaching out, that we are supporting those children, that we are supporting those families. I think in those cases, and again, this is going to depend on the specific disability. So just like any child that we work with, children with disabilities are not all the same. But I really think we're going to need to make sure that we are truly individualizing, that it may become extremely important for us to support families with things like visuals. So the daily routine pictures that you saw Jenny have earlier, there may be other visuals that are important for that particular child. It may be that we need to offer specific sensory equipment that maybe is going home, that we can work with our therapist if children receive additional therapy to figure out how we might be able to offer activities that will help children continue to work on those goals. So making sure that if you're an early childhood program and you have children with disabilities in your specific program, that you're in contact with that school district and those special education teachers and those therapists to be able to figure out what do we need to do, but I really see that being a lot more individualized.
Thanks, Holly. That was a really good answer. Michelle Lopez has a question about greeting time. Could greeting time be implemented in the beginning of a live Zoom session, maybe before you do some formal instruction or some kind of activity as children and families join in?
Sure. So you're thinking about it. So again, we want to come back to what is the purpose of greeting time, right? And so really the purpose of our greeting time is thinking about what might be new or different. So if we're using it at the beginning of a live virtual to perhaps introduce a particular activity, or we want to model for parents what that looks like so that they're able to do that again later at home, I think that that's okay. I would actually stray away from using it every time though, because what we would want to do is we want to make sure that we are actually just introducing our small group, right? So if we're introducing a small group or we're introducing a large group, that we're just going ahead and introducing those things. Again, remembering that the purpose of message board is to let children know what might be new or different for the day. And because we're not in the homes, we don't have the ability to do that on a regular, ongoing basis. But once in a while to model, sure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Holly. There have been several questions about using the first 30 days lesson planning book. And some of them were wondering how could that book still be used or put into action in a virtual setting, in a virtual way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first 30 days is a fantastic resource. It is though designed for the classroom. So like all of our other resources, you would need to actually go through that book and specifically pull out activities that you might want to do that would make sense. So things like a planning train or the planning snake to make planning time really concrete, which is some of the things that we do at the beginning, might be examples that you would give to parents, right? Move around your house as a train, right? Making those noises as you move through the house to just engage your child in the process. So thinking about those engagement strategies. So again, like other resources, it's going to be a matter of kind of flipping through and picking and choosing those that are the most applicable to the home setting.
Good answers. So Michelle Brower has talked about and asked, what was the technology that was used by Jenny in making her recordings? So could you share a little bit more about Core Advantage?
Absolutely. So actually what Jenny was using was just Core Advantage. So similar to how you might take photos or videos in the in the classroom of children so that you could upload that into the assessment process. She was actually just using the same technology, but she had the video camera pointed on her. In this case, for this particular purpose, we just downloaded those videos to use them here in our presentation. However, if you are using Core Advantage, you can then just automatically send them right out of Core Advantage out to families directly. There actually will be a couple more webinars. We have one next week, as well as one, I believe, the following week. I'll get those dates up in just a few minutes about using the Core Advantage tools specifically for this purpose. So definitely watch for those webinars.
Great. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I was going to say something too. Rosa Maldonado actually asked a really good question, and since we've developed this for our trainers, maybe you can share, you and Erica put together this Zoom live training, so maybe you can share a little bit about that, and we'll have to think a little bit more about how we could do that in terms of training and supporting teachers and training them through Zoom. So her question is, will it be possible that we could have training on how to use virtual live Zoom for pre-K?
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic, right? So we can talk about some of those ideas. We are self-taught here at HighScope as well. So there are a ton of videos out there. Maybe we can even post some of those links on our site, or if you want to reach out to us directly, we can get some of those links that we found to be particularly helpful. But we actually had to do a lot of self-teaching through using Zoom ourselves. Tons of YouTube videos that are out there. So definitely recommend just kind of figuring out what those features are. I think for the purpose of what we need, actually just a typical Zoom meeting where we don't actually even have to share screens all that frequently. There may be an occasional time where you would want to share a screen to share a picture of something, but really you're just going to have a very straightforward video conference where you're just chatting back and forth with children and families at that moment in time.
Thanks, Holly. Rima Mello has asked a question. Can you create and show us tutorials for teachers on examples of small group time and large group time? So Sharon and Jenny, it sounds like you all might have some more tutorials that you might need to put together. So maybe that would be something that we could provide in the future for teachers. So Alexandra Hammond has asked, how do we best arrange virtual meetings around families' work schedules and families in our own family schedules? That's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be tricky, absolutely. I think it's going to need to be individualized and really reaching out to families, figuring out when that best time is. Some of it is going to be dependent on what your work schedule is. If you are able and you're also working remotely, to be able to have some flexibility in your schedule, where if I'm required to work an 8-hour day, but I have families who actually aren't available until later on, might there be one day where perhaps I start later or I take off in the middle of the day to do something with my own family to jump back on later in the evening. So I think that all is going to have to be completely individualized, and then also a discussion that you need to have with your own program administrators to determine what your own job and requirements might be.
Thanks, Holly. Jenny, this next question might be able to be answered by you or even Sharon, as you've worked with families already. What is the recommended lapse of time a remote learning class should last for 3 or 4-year-olds? So can you give some examples of time that both you and Sharon did with parents earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were doing our in-person Zoom calls, we made sure to keep the overall time very short. And ours we did a lot of like large group activities. So like the first few minutes would just be kind of everybody logging on and welcoming, and because our children had been together throughout most of the school year together and with us, and then we all had to be at home and not see each other. They were all really excited, so they always wanted to talk and chat and catch up and show us their toys and show us their pets and all those things. And then we would just keep it short. I think it was probably no more than like maybe 15 minutes
15
total.
minutes,
Yeah.
that was total.
And that was from beginning to end. And we would do, you know, like the chatting, and then just like in the classroom, you know, we'd give them like time warnings. Okay, guys, 2 more minutes and we're going to get started. And then, you know, the transition would be, we would start singing our song, like I'm thinking of a song. And singing on Zoom is hard, there is lag. You just have to keep going. And then, you know, whatever the activity was, like if we were doing a scavenger hunt, then we would go into that, and just using like a lot of visual cues, like if you have a timer or a sand timer, to give them an idea of like when you're going to start, how much longer. And then the same thing, wrapping it up with lots of time warnings. But yeah, I would recommend keeping it short. You know, as Holly said, children don't understand how video conferencing works, and you know, they just, you know, it is what it is, and they want to show you, they want to talk, they want to play. And so, you know, meeting the group of children that you're working with, meeting their needs and supporting them when they are where they are.
Keeping it short is the key to a successful Zoom meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with that. And we've had some questions coming in, you know, some saying that their district is requiring them 45 minutes. And I mean, we know children aren't going to sit face to face for that long. And so to require that on virtual is unrealistic. So we need to really educate those who are making decisions to really think twice about, you know, what is going to be best. And Sharon, you're right, the less amount of time and the more we can work with parents is going to be best.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think kind of similarly, Shannon, so if you do have some of those requirements that just seem out of reach for what preschoolers are, I think I would even dive a little bit deeper. If I'm mandated to do 45 minutes, can I do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, and perhaps 15 minutes as coaching support with the family? And does that work? So really kind of thinking about how you might be able to divide that time up as well could also be a possibility.
Yeah, great suggestion. So I apologize if I'm not pronouncing names correctly, but Abuki Shamina has asked, how do you help a child whose parents are finding a problem to teach him or her how to read at home, or how to really participate in activities at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is where we need to really think about how do we break it down and talk about what it is expected at this particular age level or this particular developmental level. Again, I mentioned that that's where those scaffolding charts might come in handy, that explaining to parents that what reading looks like at this age, right, might just be the child flipping through the pictures and pointing at what it is that they're seeing, or telling a story in their own words. So just helping parents kind of understand each of those different developmental levels is going to be key. And this is so different. It's such a different world, right? Because we don't exactly know what's happening when we turn off our video cameras and we're not in the homes. But I think any opportunities that we can provide, and then just digging a little bit deeper with parents to ask them, you know, kind of let's think about what your goals are. So if alphabetic knowledge is what it is that we're looking for, let's start with the letters in the child's name. So again, kind of breaking that down to help support parents in that coaching support and that small amount of time that we do have with them.
Thanks, Holly. We have time for maybe about one more question. And Jenny and Sharon, this might be for you both, since you've actually done Zoom, well, and Holly, because one of your child was in the program. But this person is asking for some advice on when you're doing Zoom. So Michelle Bergeron has asked, when should we be muting all children on Zoom, or when should we have all mics on for children? She says, I don't want to be rude muting all the children because I want them to be able to speak freely as I would in class, but this sometimes just doesn't work very well on Zoom. So any advice that you can give her?
When Jenny and I first started, when the children first got on, we unmuted everybody. Everybody had a chance to talk. Then before, for example, if we were going into an activity, we would let the children know we were going into an activity. Then we would mute all of the children. And if it was one child's turn, we would unmute that child so that everybody can hear that child.
Yeah, and I mean, we really do wanted, our goal was to keep the children unmuted as much as
Mhm.
possible. Just like in the classroom, I mean, you can't mute them there. So, but a lot of times trying to use strategies. So if we were doing a large group activity where each child had a turn to like choose a movement. So like, this is what Jenny can do,
Mhm.
see if you can do it too. And if other children were speaking and the child was getting frustrated because they couldn't be heard, we would, again, those same strategies in the classroom. Oh, you know what? It looks like Lewis is getting really frustrated because we can't hear his idea and he really wants to tell us his idea. So using those kind of strategies as well.
Great, thank you. So we are at the end of our time to be able to answer questions, and we know that there are many more of them. We are going to try to answer those in other ways, in other avenues. So keep an eye out on our website or on our Facebook or even blog that we're going to share with you at the end. And we thank you for asking your questions, and we thank you, the panelists, for answering them.
Great. Thank you so much, Shannon, and to all of you, the panelists. I just have a few more reminders as we close out today's session. We do have some additional upcoming webinars in this series. I've talked about a few of them today. So you can register or go ahead and visit highscope.org/webinar to be able to register for any of these upcoming sessions. A certificate of attendance and the link to this webinar recording. And then of course, also those downloadable PDF documents that Jenny was mentioning earlier of our daily routine cards. Those will all be emailed out to you in 24 hours. This webinar recording will also be posted on our HighScope website. And then finally, we also have some free resources available for access, and you can find those here. Thanks again for joining us, and good luck as you enter this unprecedented school year. I want you to know that we are all in this together. So our HighScope team is committed to supporting you all through this process. Stay safe, stay healthy, and be that amazing teacher that we know that you can be. Thanks so much.